CBS Sports HQ, one preseason game down, 96 preseason games to go as training camp continues across the NFL. As the regular season approaches, belief in some teams is going to go up as players impress and get some wins, and some will go down as players get hurt, maybe don't play well during those exhibition games, and of course lose. The market dynamic, but our friends at Caesars have set their team win totals for 2022 as we get the preseason underway. And we're going to start by taking a look at the highest projected wins. That is the Buffalo Bills at the top alongside the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 11.5. Then you have Green Bay at 11. Then you have the Rams, Dallas, and Kansas City all sitting on 10.5. In terms of the lowest projected win totals, well, that is led by the Houston Texans, projected for 4.5 wins. The Atlanta Falcons only a half game better with 5. And then you have the New York Jets at 5.5. Seahawks and Lions at 6. And then Jacksonville, Carolina, Chicago projected for 6.5. Let's dive into these winning totals with our former NFL quarterback turned financial analyst, Brady Quinn, joining us for this segment. Brady, good to see you. Good to have you in the studio.
Yeah, good to be here. It's football season. It's already started. We're ready to go.
If we see Brady Quinn in the building, we know that football season is just around the corner. All right, let's dive into who you're selling off the top, who you're buying off the top. And this was kind of interesting to me, this very first team that you're buying off the top. The Washington Commanders, a stock that you are all in on.
Yes, I am. And think about that. Here's the rationale. They were a 7-win team just a year ago, and I do think they got better this offseason. Say what you want about Carson Wentz and how it didn't work out with the Indianapolis Colts. I think that probably had to do more with this vaccination status in Jim Irsay than it did the actual play on the field. So I think they get better there with Carson Wentz. Then you draft an absolute playmaker in Jahan Dotson to go along with Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel out at wide receiver position. That's not to mention Antonio Gibson in the backfield. So this is a group that I think is explosive and it's going to have some big-time playmakers that might sneak up on some people. The other thing is their defense. It's finally back healthy. They added some depth through the draft to help back up some of those guys. So I'm betting on the Washington Commanders being able to hit that over of 7.5 wins because of the Carson Wentz addition and also some of the playmakers. But let's also look at this. They have the easiest schedule, or tied for the easiest schedule in the NFL based on the records of teams last year heading into 2022. So that it's also something to be a little bit more bullish on. I think Philly's probably going to take a step back. I think they overachieved last year. Nick's turning on his first year. And look, I don't think much of the New York Giants this year. So I think Washington could be the team that surprised a lot of people.
7.5 wins they are set for. And of course, remember, there has been no NFC East repeat champion since 2004 when the Eagles did it a few seasons in a row. All right, a stock that could be on the rise or falling, depending on who the starting quarterback is the Carolina Panthers. Of course, Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold fighting it out for QB1. But Brady, at this point in time, you like this Panthers team? Well,
I like the over of 6.5 wins, so let that tell you whatever it may. And it's really for two things.
One, you're not picking them to win the Super Bowl.
No. Let's not get it twisted here, okay? I think they're going to achieve more so than what they've done the past couple of seasons being a 5-win team. I think they can hit that over the 6.5 mark. And this is betting on a healthy, productive, and starting Baker Mayfield at quarterback. Okay, I think they've got enough pieces out around him to allow him to be successful if he's back there behind center. If they go through an awkward transition from Sam Darnold or whoever the starter would be besides Baker to Baker, that's a hard hole to dig out of. But my bet is with a healthy Christian McCaffrey now in the backfield, Baker Mayfield to go along with something to prove. The guy plays with a chip on his shoulder. This is a dangerous team. They were the number 2 overall defense last year in the NFL. We feel like we don't talk about that enough. Matt Rule, again, drafted more speed, more depth on defense. So, again, when you're looking at this division, how they stack up, yeah, we know how good Tampa is. The reality is, though, Atlanta might be the worst team in the NFL. And then you got the Saints, who no longer have Sean Payton as their head coach and play caller. I'm curious to see what it's going to be for Jameis Winston. And even though it's a talented roster, we'll see how they stack up. Don't sleep on the Carolina Panthers. I think this is a team that gets over that 6.5 win mark. I'm buying them in year 3 under Matt Rule.
Does that change? I mean, forget the quarterback, but what about Christian McCaffrey? If McCaffrey is not 100% healthy, or if he goes down, are you adjusting that?
No, I'm not going to adjust it. I think it's a big loss. I think it's something that they've dealt with in the past. We've got Chuba Hubbard in the backfield too. He's very capable. I think the difference is going to be quarterback play. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why they went after a guy like Baker Mayfield is when healthy and when he's playing the way he's capable of, he's able to help lift this team up and not turn the football over quite as much as Sam Darnold has in some of those stints. So I think they've got enough depth there to help them out. And the last thing, too, is the offensive line. It was a big-time issue for them last year. You draft Ike Ekwonu, you help address some of that concern too, I think, going into this year, so they should be better as well.
One of the things when we were designing this segment is we told Brady to stay away from favorites.
Yes,
we wanted to make this a little bit challenging for him. But at the same time, one of the teams that you are looking at is a team that is one of the favorites, certainly to win the Super Bowl, and a team that's favored to get a top amongst the top winning teams in the NFL.
Yeah, I think this is a more interesting look only because the Kansas City Chiefs have had a ton of success with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, but now they're going to be without Tyreek Hill. Now they're in a division that has Russell Wilson, has a better roster with the LA Chargers, and has another playoff team a year ago in the Las Vegas Raiders. So it's going to be a tough, it's going to be a tough division to battle for when it's all said and done. But I like the over of 10.5 wins for this reason. One, it is that combination of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, but also what they did in the draft, getting Sky Moore, a guy who's going to help along with Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdez-Scantling in replacing the production lost by Tyreek Hill. They added some speed and playmakers on defense. George Karlaftis off the edge to complement Frank Clark, and then Trent McDuffie in the secondary will be a day one starter in the backfield for him. So I think they got better there. So bottom line is, if you're looking at this team and you're looking at whether or not you should be buying that stock of the over, I love it. They've got to prove to me otherwise that they're not going to be a double-digit win team, and they're not going to be the team to win the AFC West.
Okay, so let's get into some teams that you're selling. And before we come into this segment, we were looking at the projected numbers for quarterback Trey Lance with the San Francisco 49ers. And you were saying, he hasn't been a starter yet, and the projections have him having a pretty decent outing as a first-year starter with the 49ers, but that's still not enough for you to buy into them. You are selling on the Niners.
I'm selling on the Niners, especially at their win total sitting there at, 10 wins? I think is what they've got the market. I mean, you're basically buying into a couple of things. How talented this team is, this defense is when healthy, and also the fact that you're buying into Trey Lance paired with Kyle Shanahan and his creativity is going to be able to make him that sort of playmaker. I've got to see it to believe it. And so I think they could still be a winning football team at 9-8, but they're not hitting this number. From what I saw from Trey Lance last year, it looked like he still needed a lot of development, and he wasn't going to be able to do that in just one offseason. Let's not forget, over the past few years, he's only played one season, dating back to his time in college football. So he's got a lot of natural ability. I think he's got a ton of upside. I don't know that we're going to see them all of a sudden compete in another really tough division in the NFC West, considering that the defending Super Bowl champs, obviously the Arizona Cardinals, I think have something to prove as well. And yes, the Seattle Seahawks, they look to be bad, but don't count out Pete Carroll teams. They play good defense. They run the football. They'll hang around. They're scary from time to time.
Well, and that's one of those teams that could spoil things as well, right?
That's right.
They may not necessarily win the division, but certainly can spoil things. As you mentioned, Pete Carroll, one of the key members there. Okay, this one kind of surprises me a little bit.
There's got to be a surprise in here, right?
Tennessee Titans, two-time division winners in a division, sitting with Houston and Jacksonville. But you're selling on the Titans.
I'm
Explain
selling
this.
on the Titans as far as their win-loss total. I think you take the under here, and here's the rationale. Here's why. I do think Jacksonville and Houston have gotten better this offseason. I mean, no one spent more money than the Jacksonville Jaguars this past offseason. They have a new head coach in Doug Peterson who's got experience working with young quarterbacks and maximizing getting the most out of them. So I think they'll be better. I think the Houston Texans are better too. And they were a competitive team last year with Davis Mills. So I think those will be bigger battles than what we've seen in the past. This is more of a gut feeling. Something feels off there in Tennessee. And look, we have not had to worry about Ryan Tannehill in the regular season. He's been phenomenal since he's gotten to Tennessee. It's been the playoffs that have been a concern. I think that's coming to a boiling point, though. That's one of the reasons why they drafted Malik Willis in the third round this past year's draft. The other thing is, Derrick Henry, the amount of touches that he's had. You started to see the wear and tear take place last year. I think that's something, too, to keep an eye on. They drafted Hassan Haskins to provide a little bit more depth there, maybe take some of that off of his shoulders. Something tells me, though, this team might be taking a step back. And I also think with the Colts and the addition of Matt Ryan, that's another team that could end up, surprising a lot of people and winning this division. So, look, again, I'm not saying the Tennessee Titans won't necessarily be a winning football team. I don't think they're going to hit that over mark right now of their win-loss total.
I think Pete was saying earlier in the week at Colts camp, people might be sleeping on Matt Ryan.
I think a lot of people are sleeping on Matt Ryan, especially with that team, that O-line, some of their playmakers too. Don't sleep on them now, especially with that defense.
Well, and he plays in a dome, too. I mean, that's one of the things, too. He's outstanding in dome, certainly in comparison to Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
And his time with the Colts is certainly in a dome stadium. All right, lastly, reports out of training camp, not very good when it comes to the Steelers and Mitchell Trubisky and how he's kind of fitting into this offense. They're set for 7.5 wins as a total. I mean, this seems like a natural one based on the reports that we're hearing now that you would be selling.
Well, is it though? Does it seem like a natural when Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season? I mean, they're already basically projecting, even if you hit the over here, you're still having a losing season, which
Yeah.
would be a first for Mike Tomlin. But I think they go even under the 7.5 mark. Now, this is betting on a number of things. It's also not knowing what's going to happen with the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation. And even though that's a talented roster, look, Pittsburgh's got a talented roster. And so it really comes down to how many games does Deshaun Watson play this year, if any. And I think that could be one of the things that would scare you away from this bet. But let's go under the assumption that he is going to play at least 11 games, maybe a little bit more than that. If that's the case, I don't care if it's Mitchell Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, and you know I love Kenny Pickett, but they're probably the worst quarterback in the division. So that's not a big sign there. Even as good as the defense is in Pittsburgh, I still think they're going to have a hard time winning low-scoring games when you've got Lamar Jackson that you've got to deal with, Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, the defending AFC champs, and also a very talented Cleveland Browns roster. And who knows what they may do, even if Deshaun Watson's suspended for the entire season.
True.
There's a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo that could all of a sudden find his way to your roster, which I would still put, again, Mitchell Trubisky and Kenny Pickett as the worst quarterback in that division. So it seems like a low one. I mean, honestly, when I looked at this, I was like, man, Mike Tomlin's never had a losing record. I don't know how I feel about that. And even with all that defensive talent, it could be a struggle for this year for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Former quarterback turned financial analyst, Brady Quinn, joining us here on HQ, giving us his buy and sell teams as we kind of make our way into the preseason. Preseason football is underway with the Hall of Fame game. Brady, good to see you as always.
Always good to be in.
The NFL returns to CBS on September 11th. Our Week 1 slate includes the Steelers kicking off against the AFC champion Bengals. So we also have a good one in Miami. The Dolphins welcome New England for an early AFC East tilt. And we'll also have Cleveland heading to Carolina, the Baker Mayfield revenge game, part of our coverage. You can watch the games or stream them over on Paramount Plus.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.